Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans. And this video is about an article that appeared in an online Australian article just 2 months ago. And it's very, very interesting, and it talks about the impact of the collapse of South Africa on the rest of the world. Okay. Whether South Africa is teetering or slowly crumbling is moot, but one thing's clear: the country faces a raft of intersecting crises that it is ill-equipped to solve, and the world's inattention doesn't mean it's not going to matter. You hear that? You can blame the mainstream media for that, guys. You can blame the mainstream media. A collapse of Africa's most advanced nation, be it rapid or piecemeal, would have a massive regional impact with significant knock-on effects beyond the continent. South Africa's future matters most, of course, to its 58 million people, a number that is projected to rise to 65 million by 2030. Can you imagine feeding that number of people when the white farmers are gone? Good luck. A failure of what is currently the world's 25th most populous nation would be disastrous. Life may be far from rosy for the majority of South Africans, but it would get much worse if living standards fell back towards the norms that prevail in other sub-Saharan countries. We know who they are. According to the most recent World Bank data, 57% of South Africans and 74% of those in neighboring Zimbabwe live on less than $5.50 US a day. In Africa's three biggest countries by population, the situation is dire. It's 85% in Ethiopia and 98% in the Democratic Republic of Congo and 92% in Nigeria. That's not somewhere you want to be. Africa's economy is not as integrated as it ought to be, yet South Africa is an enormously important economic player, particularly for the countries of southern Africa. Landlocked Lesotho and Swaziland, along with the former South African democracy of Namibia, are part of the common monetary area which ties local currencies to the rand. If South Africa goes under, those countries will sink with it. Get me? If you live in Namibia, Swaziland, or Lesotho, when South Africa collapses, you're gone too. So there's a huge flow-on impact of what's happening there. Trade statistics underline South Africa's significance to the region. Exports produced by its relatively sophisticated manufacturing, agricultural, and services sector are especially critical. Namibia draws 57% of its imports from South Africa, Botswana 65%, and Mozambique 30%. Exports from this triad to South Africa account to between 14% and 16% of their total export trade. Zimbabwe's dependence on South Africa is more acute again. The creation of Rhodesia, of which Zimbabwe is a post-independent successor state, was an integral part of capitalism's expansion in South Africa during the late 1800s. So bilateral economic links have long been intimate, yet the relationship was previously a much more dynamic two-way phenomenon. Since 2000, when Robert Mugabe's fast-track land reform program gutted the country's agro-business country, South Africa has been less an economic partner than an emergency life support. Nearly 80% of Zimbabwe's exports, far more than any other Southern African countries, cross the Limpopo to South Africa, and 41% of its imports travel the other way. Now, think about this. South Africa now has a huge number of illegal Zimbabweans living in the country because they were escaping the poverty. It's like jumping from the fat into the fire. That's what's happening right now for these guys, and I feel very sorry for them. And you can blame the Nguni Bantu people. Anyway, let's continue with the article. The last figure, which was the 41% of its imports traveling the other way, that's with Zimbabwe, the last figure excludes an entire universe of dependence that revolves around Zimbabwean diaspora in South Africa. Pushed by economic collapse and political persecution, untold numbers of Zimbabweans have illegally migrated south into South Africa in search of work and shelter. So vast has this population movement been that the demographics of some part of Zimbabwe, like rural Matabeleland, are markedly different from what they were in the 1980s and 1990s. Some of these areas have been largely stripped of their economically active youth, who now keep those at home alive through their remittances of cash and kind from South Africa. Official figures put the value of remittances at an average of $1 billion a year over the past 3 years, and that's likely to be a significant underestimate given that much is sent through unofficial channels. Those in South Africa are estimated to contribute more than a third of the total figure, aside from drawing directly on the South African economy to support their own needs. When the two are combined, both direct dependence and remittances, it's clear that a large proportion of Zimbabweans are reliant on South Africa's economy. Even small shocks, like depreciations of the rand's purchasing power, cause serious grief for them. A repeat of Zimbabwe's economic disintegration in South Africa would be a disaster of a monumental proportion. Further afield, on the continent, geography dissipates South Africa's economic weight, but it doesn't become trivial. South Africa is the second largest exporter to sub-Saharan Africa, next to China. Yeah, the guys who are colonizing Africa, China. Together with Nigeria, South Africa generates almost half of Africa's GDP. An economic dive in South Africa would lop chunks of varying sizes off the GDP growth of many countries outside Southern Africa, something the continent can ill afford given the growth is already insufficient to reduce poverty in any substantial way. That's because Africa is in the midst of the biggest population spike in human history. The UN's medium scenario projection is that Africa's population will climb from today's 1.3 billion to 1.7 billion by 2030, double to 2.5 billion by 2050, and soar to 4 billion by 2100. Well, guess what, guys? I'm sorry, I'm going to put the car wash in that one. Starvation will bring that figure down to probably about 100 million people across the whole continent of Africa. So don't accept those bullshit figures as fact. Anyway, let's continue with the article. Africa will contribute more than 58% of the world's population growth between now and 2050, and over 89% by 2100. The end-of-century figures may differ significantly by the time we get there, depending on factors such as economic progress, but demographics point out that inertia means the projections for the next 10 to 30 years are almost certain to be relatively accurate. That means the consequences are just around the corner for everyone. If Africa doesn't get it right, it will inevitably export its problems across the globe in the form of mass migration. Mass migration. That's why I am advocating for the minority groups to get the hell out of there. I know you say that, hey, I grew up here, my family grew up here, but common sense says, hey, this place ain't good, and it's not going to get any better. Anyway, we'll just keep on going. This means the consequences are just around the corner for everyone. If Africa doesn't get it right, it will inevitably export its problems across the globe in the form of mass migration and terrorism, amongst others. It will also become a center of increasing conflict between global powers. Hunkering down behind walls and borders forces isn't going to cut it in and of itself. It's time we started caring about what happens in Africa. If we don't do it now, we'll pay later, as sure as one African birth succeeds the other. Now, that is a really, really excellent summary of what's happening in Africa right now, today. Please remember to subscribe to be kept informed, and have a great day. Bye for now, guys.